Tonight, we gently drift into yet another secret wrapped in shadows. Close your eyes and let your mind slowly quiet down as we consider a softly spoken question. What if the moon isn't quite what we think it is? You're safe now. Just breathe, relax, and allow sleep to take over. Chapter 1. A coincidence too precise. Eclipses. Alignments. A moment where everything fits just right. Ask anyone what makes the moon strange or special. They might mention its light on a still night, its dance with the tides, or just its haunting beauty. But for those who feel the moon might be more than just a rock in space, for those who imagine some ancient intelligence may have placed it there, there's one detail that refuses to be ignored: the way it mirrors the size of the sun during a total eclipse. It feels almost intentional, and some believe it is. When we stand on Earth and witness a complete solar eclipse, the moon covers the sun with flawless precision, hiding everything but a soft glowing ring called the corona. This doesn't happen on any other planet we know of. No other moon in our solar system has this kind of alignment. The sun is around 400 times larger than our moon, but it's also roughly 400 times farther away. That single ratio makes them appear exactly the same size from here on Earth. And that remarkable match is the only reason total eclipses can even happen. Mainstream scientists chalk it up to coincidence, just a fortunate alignment that happens to be occurring right now. According to them, the moon is slowly drifting away from Earth, and millions of years from today, total eclipses will become impossible. They say we just happen to exist during this narrow window in time when the sun and moon appear to match in size from our viewpoint. Maybe that's true, but for those who question it, that explanation feels a little too convenient. Just think, out of the countless combinations of size and distance the moon and sun could have had, we somehow ended up with this perfect fit. And not only that, it's all happening during the short span when humans exist to witness it. For many, that feels less like chance and more like design. To be fair, most people who believe the moon was placed here aren't claiming they know exactly who or what did it. They're not necessarily talking about flying saucers or green beings. But they do believe something about the moon's role, size, and behavior seems suspiciously tuned for life. And the eclipse? It's only the beginning. Now step back for a moment and look at how the moon influences our world. Its gravitational pull gives rise to the tides. Those tides shape our coastlines, feed aquatic ecosystems, and may have even played a part in helping life begin. But maybe even more important, the moon stabilizes Earth's axial tilt. Without it, our planet would wobble wildly, triggering severe climate shifts. Swings that could have made complex life and human civilization far less likely to emerge at all. So, is that all just random? Maybe. But many argue it's worth asking a bigger question. What if the moon was meant to be there, positioned just right to support life on this planet? Its orbit, distance, timing, even its effects, all seem to line up for our benefit. And speaking of orbit, there's something else worth noting. The moon is tidally locked to Earth, meaning it always shows us the same face. That hidden far side? We'd never see it, unless we sent spacecraft to go look. That alone is an unusual trait, especially when you pair it with the moon's nearly perfect circular orbit. Most moons, even right here in our solar system, follow more stretched, oval-shaped paths, but not ours. Earth's moon traces an orbit that's remarkably round. And that's just the start. There's also the matter of its sheer size. When it comes to ratios, no other moon compares. Ours is massive compared to its planet. Mars has two small, oddly shaped moons, more like captured asteroids than true satellites. And while Jupiter and Saturn are surrounded by dozens of moons, none of them come close to matching Earth's moon in proportion. Ours is about 1/4 the size of Earth, an enormous satellite by cosmic standards. Why is that? The most widely accepted explanation is the giant impact hypothesis. The idea goes like this. Billions of years ago, a Mars-sized object collided with Earth, and the debris slowly came together to form the moon. But this theory has its issues. For starters, the moon's composition is strikingly similar to Earth's outer layers. If it were created from the remains of a foreign object, we'd expect the moon to show signs of that other planet's materials. But it doesn't. What we see is a near match to Earth, almost too close. Those who question conventional theories aren't necessarily claiming they know who put the moon there, or why. But they argue that if every standard explanation comes with glaring gaps, perhaps we should be willing to explore other possibilities. What if the moon didn't form from a collision at all? What if it was placed here, or even constructed? To many, that idea sounds outrageous. But throughout human history, it's not a new thought. Ancient cultures across the world have told stories of a time before the moon existed. The Zulu of Africa have passed down oral traditions that speak of an era when there was no moon in the sky. Even Greek philosopher Aristotle mentioned a mysterious people known as the Proselines, those who lived before the moon appeared. Are these just old myths? Maybe, but maybe not. But what if those ancient tales aren't just myths? What if they're distant echoes, cultural memories of something real, something so ancient we've forgotten the details? Of course, not everyone sees it that way. Scientists and skeptics argue this is simply pattern finding, the human brain connecting dots where no real connection exists. They remind us that in a vast universe filled with countless stars and systems, rare alignments are bound to occur somewhere. Maybe we're just lucky. Maybe we're only here to wonder about the moon, because the very factors that created it are the same ones that allowed intelligent life to emerge. That's known as the anthropic principle, the idea that we can only observe a universe that allows us to exist in the first place. It's a valid perspective. But for those who remain unconvinced by the official narrative, that explanation leaves too many questions on the table. It doesn't account for the moon's strange precision. It doesn't answer why there's no clear evidence of a third object's debris from a supposed impact. And it doesn't explain why civilizations across the globe remember a time when there was no moon at all. Believers aren't necessarily trying to reject science. Many simply want to open up the conversation, instead of assuming the moon's position and size are just meaningless coincidences. They ask a different question. What if they're not? Because when something as massive and influential as the moon is hovering right above us, perfectly aligned to produce rare, awe-inspiring phenomena like eclipses, isn't it worth wondering why? And if, just if, it turns out the moon really was placed or made, shouldn't we want to know who did it? Or what? That's where this journey truly begins. With a question that sounds simple on the surface, Why does the moon fit the sun so perfectly during an eclipse? But that one question opens the door to many more. Questions about origin, about purpose, about design, and maybe even about the builders. In the next chapter, we go deeper, into the moon itself. Believe it or not, the idea that the moon might be hollow, or at least partially hollow, isn't confined to science fiction. It's a theory that's actually been suggested by scientists, backed by seismic readings, and considered seriously by some of the people who've studied the moon up close. So let's go deeper, literally. Chapter 2. The Seismic Mystery. Why the moon rings like a bell. What would you think if you knocked on an object and it echoed like it was empty inside? For most of us, that's a sign there's a hollow space. Something beneath the surface, not filled, but open. Now imagine tapping something as massive as the moon and getting the same kind of response. That's exactly what early seismic experiments during NASA's Apollo mission suggest happened. And for those who believe the moon might not be natural, that was the moment things got interesting. After Apollo 12 wrapped up, NASA made a bold move. They intentionally crashed the spent lunar module back onto the moon's surface. Sensors left behind by the astronauts recorded what happened next. The moon began to shake and didn't stop. It vibrated for over an hour. One NASA scientist famously said, "The moon rang like a bell." Then it happened again, this time during Apollo 13, when the third stage rocket booster struck the moon even harder. Again, the seismic waves lasted far longer than expected. Not a brief tremor, not a normal quake. The moon responded in a way that no one fully anticipated. To most people, it might sound like just an odd curiosity. But for those who suspect the moon may be something more, this was one of the earliest signs that its interior might not be what we assume. Mainstream science did offer explanations. They said the moon's inner makeup is dry and rigid, very different from Earth. Unlike here, where water helps absorb seismic energy, the moon lacks moisture. Its outer shell is fractured and brittle, causing vibrations to bounce around longer before fading. Maybe that explains it, but still, something about the extended ringing struck a nerve with those asking the bigger questions. Because if the moon really is hollow, or even partially hollow, it brings us to a much larger mystery. How could something like that form naturally at all? Most natural objects in space, planets, moons, asteroids, aren't hollow. They're solid or made up of layered materials shaped by pressure and gravity over time. That's what physics tells us. A hollow body the size of the moon would go against everything we understand about how celestial objects naturally form, which leads to a bigger, stranger question. What if it's not just hollow? What if it was built? Back in 1970, two Soviet scientists, Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov, proposed something that pushed boundaries. They published a paper titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Intelligence?" In it, they suggested a bold idea, that the moon could be an enormous spacecraft, or an artificial structure placed in orbit by unknown beings. It was, of course, speculative, but their paper appeared in a respected scientific publication, and for a time was taken seriously. Skeptics dismissed it as science fiction dressed in scientific language. They point to more recent data from seismometers and lunar missions that hint at a partially molten core beneath the surface, not a hollow one. But there's a catch. To this day, the moon's internal structure remains largely unexplored. We've never drilled deep below its surface. We've never sent instruments capable of truly peering through its layers. In many ways, we're still guessing. What lies beneath remains hidden. Believers also point to something else: the strange nature of moonquakes. Unlike earthquakes, which tend to be sudden and short-lived, moonquakes can go on for hours. Some are triggered by impacts, others by temperature shifts as day turns to night. But many of them seem unusually prolonged and oddly intense. Even more curious is how far these shock waves travel. On Earth, our molten layers absorb seismic energy. The waves slow down and fade, but on the moon, those vibrations seem to echo, moving across great distances, like a sound bouncing around inside a hollow shell. For those who already suspect the moon may be more than it appears, this kind of behavior only strengthens their suspicions. Then there's the matter of density. The moon is notably less dense than Earth. Some believe this could be another clue, a hint that it might not be solid all the way through. Maybe it contains hidden chambers, vast interior voids, or maybe it was designed that way. Of course, no one has discovered alien tech hidden beneath the lunar surface. No wires, no engines, no control rooms. At least, not that we know of. But according to this theory, if the moon was placed here by a higher intelligence, it's likely to have been here for millions, maybe billions of years. Any technology left behind would be inactive, buried deep, long hidden, and if someone went to the trouble of placing it, they probably knew how to keep it well concealed. What we can say for sure is limited. The moon's internal structure remains largely unexplored. And the seismic data we do have, it's raised more questions than it's answered. Mainstream scientists offer valid theories to explain the moon's long, drawn-out vibrations. But even so, for many, that little bit of unaccounted space is just enough to keep the mystery alive. Because if the moon is hollow, or holds something unexpected inside, that discovery could shift everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos. Chapter 3. The moon shouldn't be there. It sounds strange at first, but some people genuinely believe the moon shouldn't be where it is, not in its current position, not with its current behavior, and certainly not doing what it's doing. For those who question its presence, the mystery isn't just about how the moon got here, it's about whether something like this could exist at all under natural circumstances. And surprisingly, even mainstream scientists haven't reached full agreement on the moon's origin. No single explanation has been universally accepted. That fact alone keeps the door just slightly open for other possibilities. So let's begin there. Let's start with what science has tried to explain. There are three main theories that attempt to explain how the moon came to exist. The first is the fission theory, the idea that the moon was once part of Earth and somehow broke away. Maybe from a violent spin, maybe even an early explosion. The second is the capture theory, which suggests the moon formed elsewhere and was later pulled in by Earth's gravity. And finally, there's the most widely accepted theory today, the giant impact hypothesis. This one claims a Mars-sized object struck the young Earth, and debris from that massive collision eventually merged together to create the moon we see now. Each theory tries to explain the moon's many oddities, but not one of them does it perfectly. In fact, all three have serious blind spots, questions that researchers have struggled with for decades. Start with the fission theory. If the moon really did split from the Earth, you'd expect it to share a similar chemical signature. And, in some ways, it does. Lunar samples brought back by Apollo astronauts reveal that the moon's surface rocks have isotopic traits very much like Earth's outer crust. But here's the issue. For Earth to fling such a massive chunk into space, it would have needed to spin incredibly fast, far faster than seems physically possible without Earth itself tearing apart in the process. That makes the theory difficult to accept at face value. Then we have the capture theory. If the moon formed elsewhere, that might explain why it's so chemically unique in some ways. But capturing a large, fast-moving object into a nearly perfect circular orbit, without it flying off or crashing down, is extraordinarily rare in nature. For it to happen, there would need to be a perfect balance of velocity and energy loss. A near impossible set of conditions, threading a needle in the vacuum of space. This is why many scientists now lean on the third theory, the giant impact. A violent collision, debris scattered into orbit, a moon formed from the wreckage. It sounds dramatic. It sounds plausible. And for now, it's the most widely taught. But even this one has its problems. One of the biggest challenges to the impact theory lies in what the moon is made of. Its composition is almost a mirror of Earth's outer crust, not just in terms of rock, but down to the oxygen isotopes themselves. If another planetary body had collided with Earth, we'd expect a blend, a mix of Earth's material and something foreign, something from the impactor. But that foreign signature, it's never been found. And that's where believers start to pay closer attention. If none of the natural theories quite fit, maybe we've been asking the wrong questions. Maybe the moon didn't form from Earth. Maybe it wasn't captured by chance. And maybe it wasn't born through a random violent collision at all. Maybe it was placed. And that doesn't mean turning away from science. In fact, most supporters of the artificial moon theory begin with scientific data. They take the numbers, the observations, and ask a different kind of question. What if we're excluding possibilities because they don't match our expectations? Now think about this. The moon is unusually large for a planet of Earth size, roughly 1/4 the size of our planet. A massive ratio compared to any other moon-planet pairing in the solar system. Most moons are tiny when compared to their hosts. Our moon is the outlier, and it's big enough to do far more than light up the night sky. It stabilizes the Earth's axial tilt. It regulates the tides. It influences the length of our days. In real ways, it has helped shape the conditions required for life to even exist here. And then, there's the orbit. The moon moves in a near-perfect circle around Earth, not stretched, not lopsided like many natural satellites, just close enough to create perfect total eclipses. And the distance? It's slowly increasing, but not randomly. Not in fits and starts. It's steady, predictable, consistent. That precise behavior has led some to ask a question, not with certainty, but with sincerity. Was the moon engineered, or at least influenced, guided by something? Maybe not recently, maybe not by anything we'd recognize, But perhaps its presence, so specific, so impactful, isn't a coincidence at all. And this kind of thinking, it's not limited to modern believers. There's ancient support for it too. Back in 1970, two Soviet scientists, Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Shcherbakov, published a paper titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Intelligence?" And this wasn't buried in fringe circles or tabloids. It appeared in a respected academic journal. At the time, both men were involved in the USSR's space program, not outsiders, not conspiracy theorists. In their paper, they proposed a bold possibility that the moon might be a hollowed-out planetary object, or even a vast spacecraft, an observation post, positioned in Earth's orbit by someone. Of course, the scientific community didn't embrace the idea. It was dismissed, and still is by most. But the fact that it was taken seriously enough to be published at all, that matters. It reveals something many forget, that even in circles grounded in science, there has always been just enough room, barely there, but present, for the idea that the moon might not be what it appears to be. To be clear, no control rooms have been found beneath the lunar surface. No engines, no machinery, no evidence of technology. Not yet. But when people say the moon shouldn't be there, they're not searching for buttons and levers. They're referring to its presence, its perfect size, perfect orbit, perfect timing, so well suited for life that it feels less like a coincidence and more like a design. Even now, science hasn't fully mapped the moon's influence. We know it drives the tides. We know it helps stabilize Earth's axial tilt. But what about its role in biology, or behavior, or human culture? Ancient civilizations followed the moon's rhythm, timed their calendars to its cycles. Some believed it affected sleep, emotions, fertility, even growth. Maybe they sensed something we've forgotten. Because if the moon plays that important of a role in making Earth livable and keeping it that way, then isn't it worth asking, what if it didn't just end up here, but was put here? After all, if someone, or something, wanted to nurture a planet, make it suitable for life, and keep it in balance for millions of years, wouldn't placing a moon like ours be part of the design? Believers don't pretend to have every answer, but they do feel the current theories leave too many questions blank. When you stack it all together, the moon's size, its orbit, its effects on Earth, its strangely Earth-like composition, it begins to feel less like a natural satellite and more like a mystery we haven't solved. Maybe the moon shouldn't be there, but it is, and that fact alone keeps the questions alive. Chapter 4. Myths of a Time Before the Moon. What if the moon hasn't always been in our skies? It seems impossible. But there are ancient stories, whispered through oral traditions and carved into early history, that suggest exactly that. And these aren't the idle imaginings of science fiction writers. These are old records, passed down, preserved, remembered. To those who believe the moon may have been placed in orbit by an outside intelligence, these ancient accounts are more than myths. They may be distant memories, echoes of a time when the sky was different, when the moon hadn't yet appeared. Let's begin in Africa. The Zulu people of South Africa have long passed down stories of a time before the moon arrived. In some versions, two brothers, Wan and Mpanku, stole the moon and brought it into the heavens. According to their tradition, The moon was originally a giant egg, hollowed out and rolled into place. An oddly mechanical story for something said to have happened so long ago. It's not the only account. In ancient Greece, there were tales of people who lived before the moon. The historian Apollonius of Rhodes wrote about the Proselines, literally, those who existed before the moon. Even Aristotle acknowledged the legend. Plutarch and Lucian both described the Arcadians, an ancient people said to have walked the earth in a time before the moon hung in the sky. These were not fringe tales. They were part of the historical record, mentioned by name still taught in schools today. Across the ocean, the theme appears again. In pre-Columbian South America, the Tiwanaku culture spoke of a sky that was once moonless. And in the Bogota highlands of ancient Colombia, there was a story of the moon arriving after a great flood, hinting at a major celestial shift recorded in memory. So, what do we make of this? Mainstream historians and anthropologists tend to interpret these myths symbolically. To them, before the moon may simply mean before time, or before the current age. The moon becomes a symbol, not an object, a marker of cultural change rather than a celestial event. But from a believer's point of view, the similarities raise a different kind of question. Why would people across multiple continents with no known contact describe a sky that was once without a moon? What are the odds that this is pure coincidence? It becomes even more intriguing when we consider how oral tradition works. Cultures pass down stories for thousands of years. And while the details may shift, the core truths can sometimes endure. Many ancient societies told stories of great floods, and modern geology has confirmed that massive flooding did occur in Earth's distant past. So when cultures tell us the moon once wasn't there, it might not be fiction. It might be a memory. Some cultures have preserved memories of volcanic eruptions, events modern scientists have since confirmed actually occurred. So, is it possible that other cultures may have remembered something even more unusual? The arrival of the moon itself? If we follow that idea, we have to ask a difficult question. How recent could that arrival have been? Most scientists agree the moon is over 4 billion years old, based on the age of its rock samples and surface. But what if that's only part of the story? What if the moon, ancient in origin, wasn't always orbiting Earth, but was positioned here more recently in cosmic terms? And yes, that idea may sound far-fetched, but even today, we can place satellites in orbit. So if a civilization existed millions of years ago and far more advanced than ours, could they have done something similar, but on a much larger scale? Some theorists don't find that idea impossible. There's also something else to consider. Roughly 10,000 years ago, human civilization began to change. Agriculture emerged. Nomadic people began settling. We started planting crops, building structures, marking time, observing stars. It was a dramatic shift, so sudden that even mainstream researchers continue to debate how and why it unfolded. And some have wondered, especially those open to alternative ideas, if the moon played a role. Its steady light, its consistent pull, its influence on tides and time. Could the moon have helped regulate Earth's climate, creating the environmental stability needed for agriculture to thrive? Could its introduction or repositioning have triggered an age of growth? The moon does more than light the night. It drives our tides, shaping coastlines and marine ecosystems, which many believe played a key role in the rise of early life. It stabilizes Earth's tilt, preventing extreme climate swings, swings that would make long-term settlement and farming far more difficult. If something changed in the sky, it's not hard to imagine that early humans noticed. Maybe they told stories, maybe they remembered the time before the moon was there and passed it down. Of course, skeptics argue these are just metaphors, myths shaped by awe and imagination. To them, the moon is a symbol, a poetic muse, not a historical marker. And maybe they're right. But even so, not everyone is convinced, because when you step back and really look, the moon is unlike anything else in our sky. Oversized, perfectly placed, deeply connected to life. And when multiple ancient cultures across continents speak of a time before the moon appeared, maybe, just maybe, we should pause before brushing it all aside. It's also worth remembering that ancient people weren't ignorant. They studied the night sky, they built calendars, they tracked planets, predicted eclipses, and noticed patterns most of us would miss. Their knowledge was advanced, sometimes shockingly so. So if their stories describe change, if they say the moon wasn't always there, maybe it's worth listening just a little more closely. Even today, we don't fully understand why certain myths appear in different cultures across the world, cultures separated by oceans and generations. Is it all just coincidence? A pattern of human imagination? Or could it be the faint threads of something more real? For those who believe the moon might have been placed, not formed, but positioned, these stories don't serve as hard proof. But they do feel like clues, clues that suggest memory of something enormous, something that may have changed the sky and changed the world along with it. In the next chapter, we'll shift from stories, backed science, to the motion of the moon itself. Because whether its origin was natural or not, the way it moves is unlike anything else we know, and that makes it worth a closer look. Chapter 5. The lunar orbit. Too stable? Too perfect? There's something about the moon's path, the way it travels around Earth, that doesn't quite sit right with some people. It's not just that it orbits our planet, it's how it does it. To most of us, the moon is simply a constant. It rises, it sets, it marks the night. But if you look deeper, really deeper, the way the moon moves seems almost too perfect. Let's start with one of the most commonly mentioned oddities. The moon is tidally locked. That means it always shows the same face to Earth. One side always turned toward us. The far side? Forever hidden, unless a spacecraft swings around to show us. Now, scientists do offer a natural explanation. They say tidal forces, the pull between Earth and the moon, caused this over millions of years. And maybe that's true, but still, pause for a second. Out of every possible way the moon could spin, it just happens to rotate at the exact speed that keeps one side facing Earth at all times. That's worth noticing. Now add something else. The moon orbits Earth in a path that is nearly a perfect circle. In space, most orbits are elliptical, slightly stretched, slightly off-center. Planets orbit the sun in ovals. Moons orbit planets in gentle lopsided loops. But not our moon. Its orbit is one of the most circular of any natural satellite in the entire solar system. Not perfect, but very, very close. Close enough that even seasoned observers raise an eyebrow, especially those who wonder, is this behavior really natural? For could it suggest a guiding hand? Believers in the artificial moon theory often point to this as evidence that the moon was positioned intentionally. A circular orbit does more than look neat on paper. It creates predictable gravitational effects. It helps keep Earth's rotation stable. It ensures consistent tides. And it adds a layer of rhythmic reliability that has shaped the evolution of life and the rise of civilization itself. Mainstream scientists agree on some of these points. They acknowledge that the moon plays a crucial role in keeping Earth's axial tilt steady, and that tilt is vital. Without the moon, Earth's axis might wobble by large degrees over long periods of time. That kind of instability would lead to extreme, unpredictable climate patterns. A changing climate that quickly swings from ice age to scorching heat is not ideal for long-term evolution, especially for intelligent life. And this is where the conspiracy theory begins to creep in. Some believe this stability was not an accident. If an advanced civilization wanted to make Earth more habitable, or simply keep it that way, it would need to prevent wild climate swings. And how would it do that? By placing something massive in orbit, something with enough gravitational pull to act as a stabilizer. Enter the moon. In this view, the moon was not just placed to look pretty in the sky, or to give early humans a way to measure time. It was engineered to help Earth thrive. There is another curious detail that consistently draws attention from believers. The moon is slowly moving away from Earth, and this is not speculation. It has been measured precisely using laser reflectors installed on the lunar surface during the Apollo missions. Each year, the moon drifts approximately 3.8 centimeters farther from us. According to mainstream science, this is the result of tidal friction. Earth's rotational energy is gradually transferred to the moon's orbit, pushing it outward. That is the official explanation, and it makes sense, to a degree. But what strikes some as odd is not the drift itself, but its regularity. It does not speed up one year and slow down the next. It does not shift in sudden jumps or drops. Instead, the moon recedes from Earth at a steady, predictable rate. To those who are watching closely, that raises questions. Is it possible that this gradual separation is not merely natural? Could it be a sign of deliberate design? Some even wonder, is the moon's orbit being subtly adjusted over time? Or was it placed with such extraordinary precision that even its long-term movement, over thousands or millions of years, was calculated in advance? Now consider what we discussed back in Chapter 1. The way the moon perfectly matches the sun's size in our sky during a total eclipse. This exact match is only possible because of the moon's precise distance from Earth. If it were just a little closer, or a little farther, total eclipses would not happen. And yet, they do. Right now. Right during the brief window of time when intelligent life is here to witness them. To some, that feels remarkably, perhaps suspiciously, well-timed. Of course, skeptics have responses. They point out that tidal locking is a well-understood process. The moon did not always rotate the way it does today. At one point, it spun quickly, but over millions of years, Earth's gravity slowed it until its rotation exactly matched its orbit. As for the orbit itself, scientists explain that a nearly circular path can naturally result from repeated gravitational interactions with both Earth and the Sun. And the moon's slow outward drift, that is simply a side effect of physics, the continued exchange of energy over time. There is no need, they argue, to bring aliens or ancient engineers into the conversation. But for those who believe in the artificial moon theory, it is not about any one event or coincidence. It is about all of them, layered, connected, one on top of another. The tidally locked rotation, the almost perfectly circular orbit, the climate stabilizing effect, the precise size and distance required to create total eclipses, the measured and consistent rate of drift away from Earth. Taken individually, perhaps, they are just quirks of nature. But when viewed together, some say, they begin to feel more like a pattern. And for some theorists, that pattern suggests function. In this line of thinking, the moon may not just stabilize Earth by chance. It could be part of a larger system, designed to do exactly that. Maybe it was meant to keep Earth's environment calm enough, stable enough, for complex life to develop in the first place. Or, perhaps, it is still serving some undiscovered function, even now, far above our heads. And here is something else to consider. If you were designing an artificial satellite meant to monitor or regulate a planet, what kind of orbit would you place it in? Almost certainly, one that is fixed, one that is steady, a path that always keeps the satellite facing the same side, and always moving in perfect sync. That way, your instruments, whatever devices or systems you have in place, would have full uninterrupted focus, observing, measuring, maybe even intervening when needed. The moon does exactly that. Its orbit is stable, synced, predictable, always facing the same side, a setup that looks less like a coincidence and more like intent. Of course, there is no direct evidence that the moon is artificial. There are no lights, no engines, no visible mechanisms or structures on its surface. But for those who believe in a greater design, the orbit itself is the evidence. To them, it is the moon's pattern that reveals its purpose. Its motion becomes a kind of fingerprint, a subtle mark of intentional creation. And perhaps ancient cultures noticed it too. They built stone monuments aligned with its cycles. They celebrated its phases. They recorded eclipses with astonishing precision. They followed the moon not for mere beauty, but for guidance. To them, it was more than a sphere in the sky. It was a clock, a compass, a guardian. So we are left with a quiet question. Is the moon's orbit simply natural? The result of billions of years of gravitational fine-tuning? Or is it something else? A product of intelligence, a tool, a gift, placed long ago for reasons we do not yet understand. The truth may still be buried, deep within rock, time, and distance. But the questions persist, because even if physics explains every inch of how it moves, that does not mean it was not meant to move that way. After all, physics could be the method, not the origin. In the next chapter, we take the next step forward, from how the moon moves to what the moon is, because there are materials on the moon that are, frankly, puzzling. Some of them do not quite belong. Chapter 6. Strange elements and materials in lunar soil. For anyone who has looked up at the moon and thought it is just a big dusty rock, you may want to think again. What we have learned about the lunar surface, especially from the rock and soil samples brought back during the Apollo missions, has surprised even the experts. And in some cases, it has left scientists openly puzzled, because beneath the dust and silence, the moon is chemically stranger than it has any right to be. And for believers in the theory that the moon was placed, perhaps even built, these strange materials only add to the mystery. So let us start with something simple: titanium. The moon has quite a bit of it. Some lunar rocks contain concentrations of titanium far higher than what we normally find here on Earth. On our planet, titanium is considered a rare and valuable metal, used in aircraft, spacecraft, and other high-stress, high-strength engineering applications. But on the moon, it appears to be unusually common, particularly in specific regions, such as the Mare Tranquillitatis, where Apollo 11 first landed. Mainstream scientists explain this by attributing it to the moon's volcanic past. Billions of years ago, they say, eruptions beneath the moon's surface could have pushed titanium-rich materials into specific areas, and perhaps that is the case. But for those who believe the moon may be more than just a remnant of random geology, titanium raises an eyebrow. After all, titanium is one of the strongest, most corrosion-resistant metals known. It is incredibly resilient against temperature extremes, radiation, and time itself. If someone, or something, were building a structure designed to endure the harshness of space, to survive billions of years without decaying, titanium would be a logical material to use. And titanium is only the beginning. Some reports claim that the Apollo missions returned trace amounts of unusual elements, among them uranium-236 and neptunium-237. These elements are not naturally abundant on Earth. In fact, uranium-236 is typically produced as a byproduct of nuclear reactions. It does not just appear in nature in usable amounts. Neptunium-237 is even rarer. It must be artificially created, in a laboratory, or inside a nuclear reactor. So, what are these isotopes doing on the moon? How did materials that seem tied to technological processes, nuclear ones no less, end up embedded in lunar soil? Mainstream science remains cautious, and some suggest the trace quantities could be contamination, or the result of cosmic processes we do not fully understand. But to those who suspect the moon was modified or engineered, these materials are not simply overlooked. To them, they are markers. Another quiet clue: that something about the moon's makeup deserves a second look. Some skeptics argue that the unusual isotope readings could simply be the result of contamination, maybe during collection, or possibly during analysis back on Earth. That is entirely possible. Scientific instruments, exposure to human environments, and even radiation from space can sometimes skew results. But for believers, the presence of even trace amounts of these rare elements raises deeper questions. Are these simply the remnants of unknown natural processes? Or could they be traces of technology, the scattered debris of an ancient event long forgotten? Or perhaps these materials were placed on the moon intentionally, for reasons we have yet to understand. But the mysteries do not stop there. Lunar soil, sometimes referred to as regolith, is coated in tiny glass beads. These are not beads in the artistic sense, but microspheres of fused silica, typically formed by extreme heat. Scientists agree These likely resulted from meteor impacts, with the crashing energy melting surface materials into glass. That part is standard geology, but what draws attention is the sheer quantity of these glass beads and how evenly they appear to be distributed across the lunar surface. Glass is no ordinary substance. It is a byproduct of high energy, explosions, heat, pressure. Might some of this glass have come from something other than meteorites? Is it possible that certain deposits were formed during technological activities, ancient detonations, or even construction processes? That is a possibility some cannot ignore. And then there is magnetism. Some rocks brought back from the moon are slightly magnetic. That might not sound surprising until you realize something. The moon does not currently have a global magnetic field like Earth does. So how did these rocks become magnetized? Scientists have suggested that the moon may have once had a weak magnetic field in its distant past, perhaps billions of years ago, and that those rocks retained a magnetic signature from that time. A reasonable theory. But others wonder if these materials were exposed to artificial sources of magnetism, or embedded with elements that modern science has not yet identified. And then there is the question of age. This is one of the most frequently discussed anomalies in lunar geology. Some of the rocks brought back by the Apollo missions appear to be older than any rocks on Earth. One sample from Apollo 16 was measured at roughly 4.46 billion years old. Let that number settle in. That date makes it older than most scientific models for the moon's formation would suggest. If the moon came from Earth, or formed through a giant impact shortly after Earth's creation, then how is it possible that parts of the moon are older than Earth's own crust? Where did that rock come from? What does it say about the moon's true origin? And what are we missing? Of course, there are mainstream explanations. Scientists suggest that the moon simply cooled faster than Earth because of its smaller size. That rapid cooling allowed sections of ancient crust to remain intact for billions of years. And the dating techniques used to measure lunar rocks are not perfect. They come with statistical margins of error. All of that may be true. But still, it is another piece of the puzzle that does not perfectly fit. Now let us talk about the dust. Lunar dust, or regolith, is remarkably fine, extremely sharp, almost like powdered glass. Astronauts reported that it clung to everything. It worked its way into suits, instruments, even their lungs. They described it as abrasive, damaging equipment, and difficult to remove. And unlike dust on Earth, which has been softened and rounded over time by wind and water, lunar dust has never been weathered. There is no erosion, no softening. Each microscopic grain is jagged and completely unrefined. Some researchers have even speculated that certain microscopic compounds within the dust may have been formed under unusual conditions. Conditions that may not have been entirely natural. Conditions that might have been created. Now, to be clear, none of this proves the moon is artificial. But for those with curious minds, the evidence begins to build. High-strength metals like titanium, unusual radioactive isotopes with unclear origins, localized magnetic anomalies on a body without a global field, widespread deposits of glass particles formed in high-energy events, and a strange, abrasive dust that seems unlike anything found on Earth. All of these are real, measured and documented. The debate is not about whether these things exist. The debate is about what they mean. Believers in the artificial moon theory suggest a few possibilities. One is that the moon may be partially hollow, containing a metallic support structure beneath its surface. Another theory proposes something bolder, that the moon itself may be an ancient artifact, possibly even a spacecraft disguised to appear natural. Some suggest that the strange materials could be part of internal shielding, energy systems, or structural layers designed to keep the object intact for millions, even billions of years. Others think these anomalies are the residue of an older civilization, one that used the moon, built on it, or possibly even lived inside it, and left behind echoes of their engineering. Skeptics, of course, push back. They argue that none of this requires extraordinary theories. The moon is a natural object, they say. Its strange chemistry explained by ancient volcanic activity, a complete lack of atmosphere, and billions of years of unfiltered meteorite impacts. Lunar geology, they remind us, is still developing, and we should not leap to conclusions simply because something appears unusual at first glance. But to many believers, that is exactly the point. It is not just one weird thing. There are too many. And if our scientific understanding of the moon is still incomplete, then perhaps we should remain open, even to possibilities that do not fit neatly into current models. Even NASA has acknowledged this. In one of their own published documents, the agency described the moon as a body more complex and enigmatic than we imagined. That is their word, enigmatic. So perhaps the unusual materials found in the lunar soil are not just geological quirks. Perhaps they are breadcrumbs, small signs pointing towards something much larger that still lies hidden. Maybe the moon is trying to tell us something, and we simply have not listened closely enough. In the next chapter, we turn from lunar materials to human behavior, because sometimes the strangest detail is not what we discover, but what we choose not to talk about. Chapter 7. The Soviet and NASA Anomalies. For most people, the story of space exploration is one of triumph. The moon landings. The Saturn V rocket roared into the sky. The brave astronauts encased in white, setting foot on another world. It is a legacy built on science, courage, and discovery. But behind the headlines, behind the historic moments, there is another side to the story, subtler, quieter, often overlooked. There are odd reports, occasional gaps in the data, strange accounts filed away and never revisited, details that have led some researchers to believe there may be more to the moon's history than we have been told. And both of the major space powers during the Cold War, the United States and the former Soviet Union, have their own share of unanswered questions. Let us begin with the Soviets. In 1970, two Soviet researchers, Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov, published an article in the Soviet journal Sputnik. Its title was both bold and thought-provoking. Is the moon the creation of intelligence? These were not science fiction writers or fringe theorists. They were respected figures within the USSR's Academy of Sciences. Their paper suggested that the moon might not be natural at all. They proposed it could be an ancient spacecraft, or a hollowed-out planetoid deliberately positioned in Earth's orbit by an unknown intelligence. To be clear, This was not an official statement from the Soviet government, but it was surprising that such ideas were allowed to appear in a state-sanctioned publication, especially during the Cold War, an era when information was tightly controlled. The very fact that the article was approved and distributed gave the theory a level of credibility that caught people's attention, and it quietly encouraged many to take the moon's anomalies a little more seriously. One of those anomalies had to do with the direction of the Soviet space program. The USSR had notable success with robotic missions, including Luna 2, the first human-made object to physically impact the moon's surface. But unlike the United States, they never attempted a crewed lunar landing. Over time, their plans for sending humans to the moon faded from public view, quietly shelved. Some theorists believe the reason may be deeper than financial or logistical limitations. They suggest the Soviets may have discovered something unusual, something that made them decide not to send cosmonauts. Now let us turn to the United States. The Apollo program remains one of NASA's greatest technical and symbolic achievements, but even it comes with lingering questions. For example, much of the original footage from the moon landings, including the Apollo 11 slow scan telemetry data, was either lost or recorded over. NASA later acknowledged this, stating that the tapes had been reused during a time when videotape was expensive and supply was limited. They described it as a cost-saving decision. Nevertheless, for what is arguably humanity's most historic moment, many found it unusual, even careless, that the highest quality footage of the moon landing simply disappeared. Then there is the case of Apollo 17, the final manned mission to the moon. During part of the mission, observers noted a 4-minute gap in live communication between the astronauts and mission control in Houston. NASA explained it as a routine technical blip, nothing out of the ordinary. However, over the years, some have claimed that audio from that period was edited because of what the astronauts might have seen on the surface: strange lights or unidentified objects that did not match expectations. These claims come mainly from unofficial sources, whistleblowers, leaked stories, and independent researchers. There is no official confirmation of anything unusual. But the story lives on, repeated often enough that it has become a staple in alternative discussions about the moon, a persistent thread in the fabric of speculation. Another unusual story comes from Apollo 10. While orbiting the far side of the moon, the crew reportedly heard what they described as a strange type of music, a whistling sound that came through their headsets. This audio was not made public for decades, but when it was finally released, listeners could hear the astronauts themselves commenting in real time, surprised, even unnerved by the sounds. Later, NASA suggested the anomaly was likely due to radio interference between the command and lunar modules. A reasonable explanation, but for some, the emotion in the astronauts' voices and the timing of the event remains difficult to ignore. To those who are already skeptical of official narratives, it felt like one more reminder that the moon might not be as empty or as quiet as we have been led to believe. Then there is the question of photographs. NASA has made thousands of lunar images public, not only from the Apollo missions, but from orbiters and probes launched in the years since. Still, a number of researchers claim that some photographs contain anomalies, images where objects appear unusual, artificial even, geometric shapes, shadow patterns that suggest towers, structures, or platforms, features that do not match the surrounding terrain. NASA attributes most of these to optical illusions, lighting angles, or image artifacts, camera glitches, and natural pixelation amplified by contrast. And in many cases, that may be the correct conclusion. But for believers in the artificial moon theory, another possibility remains on the table, that some of these photographic anomalies are intentional edits, blurred or obscured areas hiding features that were never meant to be seen. Over the years, a number of whistleblowers have added fuel to that speculation. One of the most well-known is Carl Wolf, a former technician with the United States Air Force. In the 1960s, Wolf claims he was working at a NASA-affiliated facility when he was shown a set of images taken from the far side of the moon. According to him, these photographs included artificial structures, including buildings, towers, and even domes. Wolf went public with his story in the late 1990s, and despite criticism, he stood by his account until his death in 2018. Another voice is Donna Hare, a former NASA contractor who worked in the agency's photographic laboratories. She has stated publicly that she witnessed airbrushing firsthand, the editing of space images to remove objects that were not supposed to appear in the final release. She described a quiet culture of secrecy, where certain questions were not asked, and certain features were deliberately removed before the images ever reached the public. Both Wolf and Hare claim that this culture of suppression extended to internal staff, and that those who raised concerns were often silenced or forced out. Of course, skeptics point to the obvious challenges with testimonies like these. Human memory is fallible. Details change over time. Accounts can be exaggerated, whether intentionally or not. Some whistleblowers may be misinformed. Others may be driven by belief, misunderstanding, or attention. And there is truth in that caution. But still, the number of similar stories told over the decades by different voices in different contexts has kept curiosity alive. The consistency of these claims, even if unproven, continues to raise a simple but important question. Why do so many people share the same suspicions about the moon? Another case often referenced by researchers is the Clementine mission. Launched in 1994, it was a joint effort between the United States military and NASA. Its purpose was to photograph and map the moon, including detailed surface imagery and infrared scans. Clementine successfully captured images of nearly the entire lunar surface. However, there were certain areas, particularly on the far side, where portions of the image data were either lost, corrupted, or simply never released to the public. The official explanation was technical failure, temporary data loss, and that may be entirely true. But when considered alongside a long list of other anomalies, it raises eyebrows, especially for those who wonder if some sections of the moon contain things we were never meant to see. Then there is the matter of focus, or, more accurately, the sudden shift in attention. After Apollo 17, no human being has returned to the surface of the moon, not even during the rapid technological expansion of the 1980s and 1990s, for something that was once the pinnacle of exploration. The absence became difficult to ignore. At the time, NASA cited cost, public apathy, and changing priorities. And logically, that makes sense. But for some, it prompts a different kind of question. What if we found something? What if the decision to stop going, to stop sending people, despite the technological ability to do so, was not about budgets at all? What if it was a choice, a decision made after seeing something that caused those in charge to pull back? To be clear, space exploration is inherently dangerous and expensive. Programs shift, budgets get cut, priorities evolve. But when you place it all beside one another, the missing footage, the unexplained sounds, the strange photos, the abrupt silence from the Soviets, and the testimonies offered by insiders, it begins to feel less like a series of isolated events and more like fragments of a larger story. Now, none of this proves that a cover-up occurred. It does not automatically mean that alien structures were discovered and hidden from view. But what it does suggest, to many, is that not everything went according to plan. Perhaps the missions found what they were not prepared for, or perhaps choices were made to remain silent, because silence is not always an absence of meaning. Sometimes silence is intentional, and to those who believe the moon may have been placed there, the missing data, the unfinished missions, the questions left unanswered, they do not look like gaps. They look like blanks left unspoken. They begin to look like part of a larger pattern, a subtle architecture, not of stone or steel, but of silence. A pattern that hints at secrets, whether ancient or modern, hidden in plain sight. In the next chapter, we explore one of the most controversial ideas of all, that there may be structures on the moon. Not just rocks, not just shadows, but towers, domes, perhaps even something more. Chapter 8. Strange Structures on the Moon. From a distance, the moon appears barren, a dry, silent world, gray, dusty, and covered in craters. But some who have examined the thousands of lunar images released over the decades by NASA and other space agencies believe there may be more to see. A closer look has prompted researchers, independent analysts, amateur observers, and even a few former insiders to ask difficult questions about what is really on the surface. Because in the shadows, in the edges of high-contrast photos, some have pointed out shapes that do not appear to be natural. They speak of towers, domes, tunnels, and even what resemble constructed buildings. Could there be structures on the moon? And if so, who created them and why? Let us begin with some of the most frequently cited examples. One is a tall, narrow object known simply as the Shard. Photographed during the Apollo 10 mission, the object appears to rise vertically from the lunar surface, casting a long, thin shadow. Some describe it as a natural spire, perhaps a worn rock feature. But others note how unusually straight, vertical, and isolated it appears. It does not blend with the surrounding terrain. Then there is the so-called tower in Sinus Medii. Found in what some claim is an untouched NASA image, this formation allegedly shows a massive vertical column, rising hundreds, maybe even thousands of feet above the surface. Its geometry, its scale, and especially its shadow have sparked debate. Skeptics say it is a photographic glitch, an illusion of light and contrast. But believers suggest it may be an ancient structure left behind by a forgotten intelligence, perhaps collapsed and weathered, but still standing. Another widely discussed formation is known as the castle. The name refers to a cluster of geometric features visible in some Apollo 10 imagery, appearing to hover or hang just above the surface. Some describe it as a floating structure, tethered by something unseen or suspended above ground. NASA has never addressed it directly, which has only deepened the questions. And once again, opinions are divided. Many in the scientific community point to pareidolia, the brain's tendency to recognize patterns or shapes where there are none. Clouds look like animals. Faces appear in shadows. We see familiar things in random imagery. But as always, not everyone is convinced. Because in space, there is no wind, no water to erode shapes into curves or illusions. Which leaves open the question, if those shadows and lines were not drawn by wind or time, then what shaped them? Much like seeing familiar shapes in clouds or rock faces, many argue that we are simply projecting meaning onto the unknown. It is a natural habit of the human mind, spotting patterns where there may be none, and in some cases, that may well be the truth. But for others, the images demand a closer look. Over the years, some independent analysts have put lunar photos under digital examination. Using modern software, they claim to have detected signs of precise alignment, features such as right angles, equal spacing, and structured layouts, patterns that are rarely found in pure geology. Even minor variances in light, shadow, and depth, they argue, point towards something that may not be entirely natural. Another mystery comes in the form of deep openings scattered across the lunar surface. To scientists, these are likely collapsed lava tubes, natural tunnels left behind by ancient volcanic activity. But those who entertain alternative possibilities wonder, what if these openings are not natural at all? Could they be engineered passages made to provide access to what lies beneath? Speculation increased in 2009 when Japan's Kaguya orbiter captured images of a sizable, perfectly round hole on the moon. Roughly 80 meters across and stretching over 90 meters deep, it appeared almost too clean, too cylindrical, to be ordinary. NASA's own Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter later confirmed the same location. Scientists still lean toward a volcanic origin, but that has not stopped others from asking, is this an entry point? A controlled breach into an underlying structure? Then there is the matter of the far side of the moon, the hemisphere forever turned away from Earth. Yes, it has been photographed by probes and satellites, but there are those who claim that some high-resolution data has been limited, restricted, or even quietly edited. In several publicly released image sets, researchers have pointed out file mislabels, inconsistencies, and unexplained gaps. That silence, that absence of clarity, has kept speculation alive. One of the most often discussed images comes from Apollo 17, photo ID AS 17-1 35-2 0680. In this frame, some say a faint rectangular or cube-shaped figure can be seen rising from the lunar horizon. NASA has since explained that the shape is likely due to optical effects, possibly lens reflections or particles within the camera housing, but many remain skeptical. The image has been dissected and debated online for years, with some convinced it captured something physical, something unmistakable. Finally, there is Luna 9, the Soviet Union's historic soft landing on the moon in 1966. an achievement welcomed by space historians, but one that later gave rise to a different kind of attention. Attention not just for what the probe transmitted, but for what might have been seen, then kept out of public view altogether. It did not take long for the world to see the photographs from Luna 9, the Soviet probe that made history in 1966 with the first successful soft landing on the moon. Images were released soon after. Simple black and white snapshots of a desolate rocky surface. But then came the rumors. Some claimed that the earliest images, before they were released publicly, included unusual figures in the background. Tall, upright forms, resembling pillars, or perhaps structures. Official explanations attributed these impressions to nothing more than signal interference, unexpected glitches in the transmission, a warping of lines and contrasts during the transfer of data from space to Earth. But as has often been the case, once the idea is introduced, once the suggestion is made, it takes on a life of its own. Because the question is no longer just, what are we seeing? It becomes, what are we not allowed to see? One of the most contentious names associated with these deeper claims is Ken Johnston, a former consultant affiliated with NASA during the Apollo era. Johnston has spoken publicly about what he says he witnessed. According to him, certain photographs taken by Apollo crews showed clearly artificial-looking structures and were later airbrushed or edited before being archived or released. He claims that he personally observed technicians removing or obscuring objects in the images, and that what was eventually published did not match what he had originally seen. Critics have dismissed him. They point to inconsistencies in his background, question the accuracy of his memories, and argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But to believers, those already aware of decades of visual anomalies and missing data, Johnston is a whistleblower, offering a rare glimpse behind a carefully managed curtain. So then the question becomes, if structures really do exist on the moon, what are they? Speculation ranges widely. Some suggest they could be ancient alien outposts constructed for observation, study, or monitoring. Others believe the moon may function as a kind of archive or vault, containing advanced knowledge or artifacts from a now forgotten civilization. And a few go even further. They suggest the moon itself could be artificial, a vast engineered object, and that the so-called structures are surface features revealing parts of its internal systems. Of course, none of these claims have ever been officially verified. There is no known hard evidence proving their existence, and skeptics are quick to remind us, until humans return to the surface or send highly detailed, unbiased robotic expeditions, these questions are likely to remain unanswered. Light, shadow, and the natural properties of lunar imaging can deceive even the most experienced observer, and digital manipulation, even with the best intentions, can create shapes and illusions that were never there to begin with. But one truth remains difficult to escape. Something is being seen. In image after image, decade after decade, people continue to notice shapes, patterns, and placements that do not fit neatly within the expectations of geology. Perhaps those shapes are nothing more than tricks of light and time, but perhaps they are something else, because in the end, the debate is not only about whether structures exist, It is about whether the moon holds a story far deeper and far stranger than we were ever told. Maybe it is a relic, maybe it is active, or maybe, just maybe, we have not yet dared to look closely enough. In the next chapter, we shift perspective. What if the moon is not just a passive presence? What if it is active, more than a relic, more than debris? What if it is watching us? And if so, who or what is behind that gaze? Chapter 9. The Moon as an Observation Platform. We often view the moon as a silent companion, a quiet presence that follows us through the night sky, unchanging, dependable, still. But what if it is not just sitting there? What if it is observing? The idea may sound like science fiction, a plot from a forgotten novel or film, but to those who believe the moon was intentionally placed, this is not the leap it appears to be. Because if it was put there, surely it had a purpose. And from a strategic standpoint, watching Earth would be a logical one. Let us begin with something everyone agrees on. Because of tidal locking, we on Earth only see one face of the moon. It never rotates to show its far side from the ground. The same face, always turned toward us. The other side remains hidden, forever facing away. But the side we can see is always present. From every continent, every sky, every generation, it is as if the moon never blinks. From a surveillance standpoint, the moon offers a perfect location. No interference from weather, no need for low-orbit satellites or complex infrastructure. From the surface of the moon, one has a direct line of sight to the entire Earth, all day, every day. Weather systems shifting across continents, city lights igniting at dusk, migratory patterns, storm development, even technological signals, all of it visible. No transmission delays, no relay stations, just a fixed platform, quietly overlooking the world. Now, let us place that into a wider technological frame. If human beings, just a few centuries into industrialization, have already developed telescopes, surveillance satellites, and drones, then what might a civilization 10,000 or even a million years ahead of us be capable of? If such a species wanted to monitor Earth without interfering, if they wanted to observe, without making contact, where would they place their instruments, their sensors, their outposts? From both a logistical and tactical perspective, they would place them on the moon, a stable, silent vantage point, always facing the world below. If the moon is natural, then perhaps this is all coincidence. But if it was designed, then maybe. The design included a front row seat, and maybe it is still being used. This line of thinking, the observation theory, is one of the main reasons believers argue that the moon was placed, not just to stabilize Earth's tilt, not just to influence tides or support the development of life, but to watch, to monitor, to observe, perhaps even to intervene in ways we do not yet understand. Modern proposals mirror the idea. In recent years, both military strategists and private aerospace firms have suggested the use of lunar outposts, installations that could serve as monitoring hubs, surveillance relays, or even forward-positioned defense systems. From the moon, one can see Earth in full view, day and night, without obstruction. So, the concept, once considered science fiction, is now actively discussed in strategic and defense planning circles. Which leads back to an uncomfortable question. If we are considering building that kind of system now, could someone else have done it long ago? Let us look deeper, beneath the surface. The moon hides what scientists call mascons, short for mass concentrations. These are unusually dense regions below the crust, identified when spacecraft orbiting the moon were subtly pulled off course. Mainstream science attributes these anomalies to ancient asteroid impacts that compressed the lunar crust. However, some researchers are not convinced. To them, mascons might be more than dense rock. They could be embedded systems, energy sources, monitoring nodes, or something altogether more complex. And that is not all. Over the years, instruments have picked up mysterious electromagnetic signals from the vicinity of the moon. Some of these transmissions do not match known natural phenomena. Their frequencies do not correlate with solar wind, magnetic fields, or solar storms. Could these signals be artifacts of buried devices? The byproducts of a dormant system still faintly pulsing beneath the surface? Or are they simply unknowns, naturally occurring emissions we have not yet fully decoded? Let us not forget the moon's persistent, unexplained effect on human behavior. Although it lies over 300,000 kilometers away, the moon's full phase has long been associated with spikes in emergency room visits, unusual behavior, and even strange police activity documented by departments across the world. Science often calls these patterns anecdotal, but many ancient civilizations believed the moon had a profound influence on emotion, fertility, instinct, and mental balance. Was this purely myth? Or were early societies sensing something real, something we have since overlooked? Some theorists suggest the moon might not just observe, it might also interact, subtly, quietly, through low-frequency transmissions, guidance fields, or regulatory tones, not to control, not to harm, but to guide, stabilize, or nudge humanity in a particular direction. Skeptics have raised important counterpoints. Mascons have been well studied through gravitational mapping. Biological effects of the full moon remain unsupported by controlled studies, and we have never discovered a camera, antenna, or relay dish perched on a crater rim. All true. But believers offer another perspective. If such a monitoring system exists, created by a civilization far beyond our own, would it look anything like the devices we use today? Would it not be buried, encoded in frequencies we do not currently detect? Or perhaps dormant, until it is time to activate? Then consider the phenomenon of moonquakes. These seismic events do happen, but not all of them are caused by meteor impacts or temperature shifts. Some occur deep underground, quiet, suddenly, without a clear external trigger. Are these natural interior adjustments of the lunar body, or is something moving within? And finally, there are the radio blackouts during Apollo missions when the spacecraft passed behind the moon. During that phase, the far side, all communication with Earth was lost. It was expected. It was planned. But still, in that window of silence when no one could hear what was said, could something have happened? The moon remains just out of reach, and perhaps still watching. Of course, the blackouts during Apollo missions were expected. Radio signals cannot pass through solid rock. When a spacecraft moves behind the moon, communication with Earth simply cuts off. But there are those who believe that what happened during those silences has never been fully acknowledged. Stories persist. Rumors of unusual lights, strange radio transmissions, and even contact experiences that occurred when no one back home could hear or record the moment. None of it is confirmed. No official transcripts show anything out of the ordinary. But still, the whispers remain. And when you combine the moon's natural features, its fixed orbit, its permanent orientation to Earth, its absence of atmospheric interference, and reported anomalies, it becomes difficult for some to dismiss the idea entirely. Because if one were to build an observation post, if the goal was to study the rise of a civilization without being noticed, the moon would be the textbook location. From there, every movement on our planet could be traced, tracked, and recorded, without a single telltale sign from below, which raises the next question: who would be watching? That is where the theories begin to diverge. Some suggest it is an intelligent extraterrestrial presence, perhaps connected to those behind ancient visitations recorded in myths and stone. Others believe it might be the work of a long-lost civilization from our own solar system, an origin native, not alien, a race that once flourished and vanished, but left a quiet mechanism in place to monitor what came after. A few propose something even larger, a fail-safe structure designed by distant creators we have yet to meet or understand. Its job: to observe, to protect, or to intervene, only when necessary. To skeptics, this is nothing more than creative fiction. They point to the lack of instruments, the absence of detected signals, no visible machines, antennas, or power sources. They argue that the moon's orbit, rotation, size, and seismic behavior can all be explained with current models of physics and astronomy. And yes, much of it can. But for believers, the placement, the relationships, and the consistency of the moon's presence are too precise, too purposeful, and too beneficial to life on Earth to be dismissed as lucky coincidence. To them, science is not a finished book. It is a story that is still being written. And just because we have not found a system does not mean it is not there. It may be masked, it may be buried, or perhaps it simply waits for the right moment, a moment we will not recognize until it happens. In the end, whether the moon is an engineered eye in the sky or one of nature's most remarkable coincidences, it leads us to a question that remains worth asking. If someone was watching us, would we even know? In the next chapter, we shift from theory to testimony, to the voices of those who were there: astronauts, insiders, contractors, and engineers who say they saw things that did not match the official record. Because sometimes the silence around the moon speaks louder than anything ever said about it. Chapter 10: Testimonies from Astronauts and Insiders. For all the scans, photographs, and journals we have collected about the moon, what often keeps the ideas alive is not what we have seen. It is what people have said, and more specifically, what certain astronauts and former employees have hinted at over the years. Some offer cryptic quotes, others frame their experiences in questions, but the message at times is clear. They saw something, they remember something, and for those willing to listen, that may mean more than any photograph ever could. Let us begin with Buzz Aldrin, the second human to walk on the moon, and a name forever tied to one of history's greatest achievements. In several interviews, Aldrin spoke of seeing something unusual during the Apollo 11 mission. an unidentified object moving near their spacecraft. He later clarified that it was likely a detached panel or part of their mission hardware. But the simple fact that this statement came from an astronaut launched waves of speculation. And for many, the initial glimpse, before the later clarification, was enough to spark questions. Then there was his comment regarding Phobos, one of the small, irregularly shaped moons orbiting Mars. Speaking publicly, Aldrin once said, "We should visit the moon of Mars." There is a monolith there. When people find out about that, they are going to say, "Who put that there? Who put that there?" Was he speaking metaphorically? Was it simply an offhand comment, meant to stir public curiosity? Perhaps. But for those already questioning the official narrative, it felt like something else, a breadcrumb, a glimpse, from someone who had seen more than he would ever say. Another name often referenced is Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon during Apollo 14. After leaving NASA, Mitchell became a passionate advocate for the study of consciousness, quantum phenomena, and the existence of intelligent life beyond Earth. Mitchell did not claim to have encountered aliens during his mission, but he publicly stated, many times, that he believed advanced civilizations had visited Earth, and that elements within global governments had deliberately concealed this reality from the public. In one interview, he said, "I happen to have been privileged enough to be in on the fact that we have been visited on this planet, and the UFO phenomenon is real." Coming from a former astronaut, someone who had seen Earth from a perspective few ever will, those words carry weight. Then there was Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, and perhaps the most reserved of all Apollo astronauts. Armstrong rarely gave interviews and was famously cautious with his language. But it was his 1994 speech at the White House that continues to attract attention. In it, he said, "There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers." To some, it was poetic, meant to inspire students and future explorers. To others, it sounded like a carefully chosen phrase, hinting not just at discovery, but at what remains hidden. Beyond the public statements, Armstrong's name comes up frequently in conspiracy discussions. Some claims suggest that Armstrong and Aldrin witnessed something unusual during the moon landing, structures, or an object that did not belong there. Stories reference missing audio or alleged private radio transmissions sent back on secure channels. NASA has denied these reports. No authenticated recordings, transcripts, or evidence have ever surfaced. And still, the rumors refuse to fade. Because when astronauts speak, even in fragments, even with hesitation, people listen. And when those fragments suggest more than they confirm, they become something else entirely. They become questions with no official answer. And it is not just astronauts who have spoken up. Over the years, numerous contractors, engineers, and technical personnel have come forward with stories of their own, stories that quietly echo the bigger claims. We previously mentioned Carl Wolf, a former U.S. Air Force technician who worked in photographic processing during the 1960s. According to Wolf, he was shown high-resolution images taken of the far side of the moon. He says the images revealed something unexpected, structures, geometric and artificial in appearance. The technician who showed him the photographs, Wolf claims, appeared nervous and allegedly whispered, "We found a base on the backside of the moon." Wolf went public with his story many years later. It has never been verified, and skeptics dismissed it as unprovable. But Wolf stood by his account until his death in 2018. Then there is Donna Hare, a former NASA contractor who worked in the photographic labs. Hare alleges that she personally witnessed photos being edited, not for clarity, but for removal. She says images containing unexplained objects, particularly those captured in Earth orbit or on the Moon's surface, were airbrushed before they were cleared for public release. She also claims that some employees who asked questions were pressured or even threatened into silence. Her words, like Wolf's, remain unconfirmed, but persistent. And then there is Ken Johnston, another contractor connected to NASA during the Apollo era. Johnston has said that he was instructed to destroy certain photographs and data, images gathered during the lunar missions, but instead, he kept them. He claims that within those photos were structures, shapes, and angles that did not seem natural, shadows that he believed were cast by more than rock. In short, evidence of something that did not belong. All three names, Wolf, Hare, Johnston, have been scrutinized. Skeptics argue that memories change over time, that people sometimes misinterpret what they see, and in some cases they may even seek attention or inflate details for personal reasons. And yes, in the world of whistleblowers, there is always that risk. But for believers, the goal has never been to prove every detail of every individual account. It is about something larger, patterns. When people, often in unrelated roles and across decades, describe experiences that point in the same direction, it begins to feel less like coincidence and more like a riddle waiting to be solved. And there is another layer to this silence. Many astronauts, especially from the early Apollo missions, remained reserved throughout their careers. Neil Armstrong rarely gave interviews. Others, when asked about the moon, answered carefully or changed the subject. Perhaps it was personal preference, a desire for a quiet life away from endless speculation. Or, perhaps, they were not allowed to say more. Some have suggested that astronauts may have been bound by non-disclosure agreements, especially during the height of the Cold War, when secrecy was standard protocol. And any unidentified event in space could have been treated as a national security issue. There is no official confirmation that such agreements existed specifically for lunar missions. But given the secrecy of the era, many believe it would not have been unusual. And now, years later, cultural attitudes are shifting. Government agencies, once silent about any form of unknown aerial activity, are beginning to speak more openly. In recent years, the United States government has authenticated multiple pieces of the military footage showing unidentified aerial phenomena. They have acknowledged that some of these encounters remain unexplained. They have even launched formal investigations into what might be operating in our skies. If that doorway is beginning to open, some wonder how far it may open next. Might it eventually lead beyond Earth's atmosphere to the moon itself? In the end, the testimonies of astronauts, contractors, and insiders do not prove that the moon is artificial or that it contains alien technology. But they do something else. They keep the discussion alive. Because when voices that close to the truth begin to say, "We do not know everything yet," it is difficult not to listen. And in the next chapter, we reach the question that sits at the center of it all. If the moon was placed, by whom and why? Chapter 11. Who put the moon there, and for what reason? If we entertain, even for a moment, the idea that the moon did not simply appear by chance, if its size, its placement, and its relationship with Earth were all a matter of design rather than accident, then one question naturally follows. Who designed it? And what was the purpose? Across the previous chapters, we explored the theory that the moon may not be a natural satellite, but something closer to a construct, a finely balanced mechanism positioned with intent. From its ability to create perfect eclipses, to its seismic behavior, electromagnetic quirks, and unusually precise orbit, the moon, some believe, behaves more like a system than a stone. But if this is true, then the next logical question is, who built it? Let us begin with the most widely held theory among those who support the artificial moon hypothesis: extraterrestrial intelligence. Given the scale of the universe, billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, it would be statistically naive to assume that ours is the only planet to have ever hosted intelligent, technologically capable life. And if we accept that such civilizations may exist, then we must also consider the possibility that one of them may have visited here long before us. Some theories point not to distant civilizations in abstract, but to names found in our own ancient texts. The Anunnaki, described in early Sumerian writings, have captured the attention of both scholars and theorists for decades. According to certain interpretations, popularized by authors such as Zecharia Sitchin, the Anunnaki were not mythical deities, but extraterrestrial visitors, beings who came to Earth thousands of years ago and played a direct role in guiding the rise of human civilization. In some versions of the story, the moon was brought into Earth's orbit by the Anunnaki as a way to stabilize conditions, or perhaps even to monitor the growth of the life they helped shape. Other theories expand the scale further. They propose the moon may be a technological artifact left behind by a now extinct galactic civilization, a species advanced enough to seed life across the cosmos and then step away. The moon, in this view, is one of the last surviving pieces of their experiment, still functional, still doing what it was built to do, even if its creators are long gone. And while these ideas are speculative, they attempt to answer a haunting question. If someone put the moon there, where are they now? Perhaps they left, perhaps they moved on, or perhaps the moon is the only thing they left behind, an echo still orbiting the Earth. A more grounded version of the theory suggests the moon was not built from scratch, but instead modded from something that already existed. In this concept, a natural satellite, a captured asteroid, maybe, was altered. Its interior is hollowed, reinforced, or infused with technology. A hybrid, natural on the outside, but something else beneath. This might help explain the moon's dense outer shell, its lighter core, and its strange seismic properties, like ringing for hours after impact. Now, let us consider the motive. If the moon was placed by someone, then why? One possibility is planetary stabilization. As we explored earlier, the moon plays a key role in keeping Earth's axial tilt steady. Without it, our planet could wobble violently over long periods of time, disrupting climate and making it harder for life to thrive. If an intelligent force wanted to nurture life, or simply observe it, they may have realized that Earth needed help to remain habitable. The moon, then, becomes not just a beacon in the sky, but a carefully placed anchor. Another possibility is surveillance. As discussed in Chapter 9, the moon is positioned to continuously observe the Earth's surface. Its locked orbit allows for a fixed view of the same side, always watching. From a technological standpoint, it would be the ideal location for long-term monitoring. If the moon is part of an ancient observation system, a kind of galactic outpost, its purpose might be simple: to gather data, to watch quietly, without interfering. There is also the terraforming theory. In this scenario, the moon was not placed just to stabilize or observe, but to actively shape the Earth in preparation for life. By influencing tides, atmospheric behavior, and perhaps even Earth's rotational balance, the moon may have helped engineer the conditions we now live in. It is no longer simply an observer. In this view, the moon is a tool, a vital instrument in preparing a planet for biology, for intelligence, for us. And finally, some go even further. They propose that the moon may not only shape the environment, it may influence us, human emotions, cycles of fertility, patterns in mental health. The full moon's connection with biology has been whispered across cultures for millennia. Is this folklore, or is it something more? Could the same force that placed the moon there have given it a built-in role, not only in stabilizing life, but guiding it? To skeptics, these ideas stretch beyond the known and into speculation. But to those who believe, the deeper we look, the less ordinary the moon begins to seem. While much of what we have explored remains under debate within scientific communities, there are some effects of the moon that no one questions. Its control over Earth's tides is real, and through those tides, it has shaped every form of life that evolved from the ocean. That influence is not disputed, but some wonder if the moon's impact goes further, beyond the oceans, into something more subtle. Could the moon be emitting frequencies, gentle, invisible signals that affect human consciousness in ways we do not yet understand? Believers say yes. They point to unusual emotional patterns during full moons, unexplained mood shifts, and the long-held belief in a connection between lunar cycles and human behavior. Then there are theories even further beyond the ordinary. One suggests that the moon is part of a quarantine mechanism, not just a satellite, but a form of cosmic containment. In this concept, the moon watches over Earth as a kind of boundary. It monitors, but also isolates, not to harm, but to protect. Protect us, or perhaps protect something else from us. This ties into the zoo hypothesis, the idea that Earth is a preservation zone, observed from a distance, left untouched, not because we are unimportant, but because we are being studied, watched, but not yet welcomed into the broader community. Then there is a different kind of interpretation, not scientific, not technological, but spiritual. To many ancient cultures, the moon was never just a celestial body. It stood for intuition, regeneration, a symbol of unseen cycles, emotional, energetic, even transformational. In some traditions, the moon was believed to be a gateway, a bridge between the physical and the metaphysical, a tuning fork for consciousness, a guidepost for spiritual evolution. Speculative? Yes. but not without consistency, and not without patterns we can measure, feel, and trace through time. Because regardless of interpretation, the mathematics remain. The alignments, the ratios, the behaviors, the timing, they are not imaginary. They are real. And so the question returns, not whether the moon exists as it does, but whether its design is something far more deliberate than we once believed. Skeptics offer explanations grounded in physics. They point to the giant impact theory, suggesting that the moon formed from an early collision between Earth and a Mars-sized body. Natural processes shaped it. The orbit we see now, they argue, is the result of long-term evolution and celestial dynamics. Perfect alignments, they say, are coincidence. Our brains seek patterns after all. An observational bias makes those patterns feel more profound than they really are. But for others, the feeling lingers. Why does the moon appear exactly the same size as the sun during a total eclipse? Why does it perfectly regulate the Earth's cycles? Why do so many ancient stories from unrelated cultures describe its arrival as though it was placed? Some believe we may never know, but others wait. Because space agencies and private companies are returning to the moon. Not tomorrow, soon. As new missions set their sights on deeper scans, subsurface drilling, and high-resolution observation. Some wonder, what will we find? Will new instruments detect signals previously buried in noise? Will surface anomalies, once dismissed, reveal deeper meaning? Will what we thought were shadows become something more? Or will we simply begin to understand the moon, not with new equipment, but with a new perspective? In the final chapter, we will ask the most important question of all, because this story has never been just about whether the moon was placed. It is about what happens when we look at the sky and allow ourselves to ask that question out loud. We have examined nearly every facet of the moon mystery, from mathematical symmetry and seismic puzzles to cryptic testimonies and ancient tales. And while the idea that the moon was placed with purpose may have once sounded like pure fiction, to those who have truly looked, the questions raised are enough not just to raise eyebrows, but to stir something deeper, curiosity. So where do we go from here? Not long ago, even asking these kinds of questions was enough to be dismissed outright. Discussions about artificial moons, alien encounters, or hidden surveillance systems were the realm of science fiction and conspiracy theory. But today, that is changing. Governments have begun acknowledging what they once denied. Classified files are being released. Footage of unexplained craft is being shown to the public. Former intelligence and military officials are now testifying under oath that something real is out there, and we do not yet understand it. What was once fringe is now entering the mainstream. And that shift matters, because if the moon does hold secrets, they will not likely come from belief or theory, but from exploration. And the truth is, there is a lot of exploration coming. NASA's Artemis program is preparing to land humans on the moon for the first time in over 50 years. China is sending robotic explorers and plans to construct a permanent base. Other nations, including India, Russia, and partners across Europe, are expanding their lunar ambitions. Private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are developing systems to reach and return to the moon. In short, The moon is about to get busy again, and for many believers, that means one thing: opportunity. With new missions come new technologies, higher resolution scans, deep core samples, improved seismic instruments, and orbital systems able to spot details we could never see before. What if we finally find something we missed? A strange metal, a buried design, a data anomaly that does not fit any known pattern? Or what if we hear something, a signal, a transmission, or even a silence that feels too calculated? Some believe future astronauts may experience what the Apollo crews only hinted at: strange lights, unexplainable sensations, or quiet moments with no official record. And if that happens, what then? What if the evidence becomes undeniable? What if we learn, conclusively, that the moon is not just a natural satellite, but a relic of intelligent design? What would that mean for us? For science? For religion? For everything we have ever assumed about who we are and where we came from? Those who support this theory often say that proving the moon is artificial is not even the most important part of their work. They are more focused on the reaction it would cause. Because if we had to accept that an advanced force shaped our sky long before our history books were written, we would have to rethink everything: our place in the galaxy, our understanding of time, our role in something far larger than ourselves. Would that information be shared freely? Some believe it would not. They point to decades of secrecy, redacted reports, footage missing from archives, photographs altered. They wonder, what do certain agencies already know? Who gets to decide when, or if, we are ready? But not all discovery comes through institutions. Today, citizen science is more powerful than ever. Amateur astronomers, digital analysts, and independent researchers are combing through thousands of open-source images, telemetry files, and lunar scans from laptops and backyards. Some of the most intriguing finds came from these unexpected places: a shadow in an archived photo, a pyramid-shaped structure spotted by telescope, a detail left unnoticed until someone looked closer. It is a reminder: if the truth is hidden in plain sight, then it may not require special access to find it, only the willingness to keep asking questions. Skeptics will always exist, and they should. Healthy doubt keeps our thinking sharp, but there is a difference between questioning a claim and refusing to even consider that something strange might be real. Because for those asking these questions, the goal is not to abandon science. It is to expand it, to ask more, to go further than we were told was acceptable, to explore not just the physics of the moon, but the patterns behind it, its orbit, its timing, its presence, the strange consistency of stories that suggest it arrived, not evolved. In the end, perhaps the moon is natural, just an improbable satellite with a unique set of quirks. But perhaps not. Maybe it is something deliberate, a key, a remnant of something older, something to watch, something waiting. And if that is true, then this is not the final chapter at all. It is only where the story begins. Because what matters most is not whether the moon is what we thought. It is that more people are finally starting to look and ask and wonder. And as long as we keep looking up, then this story is not over. It is just beginning.